Hi, I'm back again, Willie Campbell, and I am doing part two of a series of videos that I'm going to be doing pertaining to my life after having spent 33 years in prison. And yesterday, I kind of gave a brief explanation on how I'd actually how I was raised and how I came up. And today, what I'm going to do is just briefly give you a beginning history of my life as a child and what I believe potentially led to my incarceration in 1986, almost 34 years ago. I stayed incarcerated for 33 years and have only been out of prison now for approximately 8 months. So let's get to it. Um, I'm gonna try to give you like bits and pieces because the entire rundown of a story sometimes bores the viewer, and I don't want to bore you. I want you to stay interested in what I am speaking about because in order for you to understand how I was able to endure prison for 33 years, I need you to understand from my perspective what I believe potentially set me up since I was a child to eventually grow up and actually enter the Louisiana prison system. Um, so, like I said yesterday, my mother, I have memories of her. Her name was Dorothy Jean Campbell. She was married to my father, Reverend Willie Campbell. And when she discovered that she was ill with a disease called lupus, for the most part, I believe that they separated. I don't know if it was her that decided that they should separate or if it was he that decided they should separate, but the mother-child bond was so strong with my mother and I that I never really liked having to leave and go and stay with my father because whenever I did, his way of schooling me or teaching me or interacting with me was extremely emotionally, physically, and spiritually painful. Not only my father, which most of nearly all of the physical abuse that I endured was at the hand of my father, which at that time, whippings and beatings wasn't considered child abuse. It was considered a proper way to bring up a child. And my father, being a Methodist preacher, his logic and reasoning came from his religious beliefs. Spare the rod, spoil the child. And what I've noticed is that many parents who believe in physically chastening their children, for the most part, they overdo it. All right. If you're sending your kid, like I was sent, to school with welts along their backs from thick extension cords from the back of their neck all the way down to their ankles, and they are unable to dress out for PE because someone is going to notice, and they've already been told by the parent that if anybody ever comes and questions me as in reference to how I am treating you, then I will kill you. you know, the fear that's in the child is to not dress out for PE when they go to school and not talk about the issues that are going on in the home because a child doesn't know how to do that anyway unless prompted by another adult who assures him that or her that everything is okay and that's something that they can actually talk about. We deal with the issues of little girls being molested for the most part by loved ones who have threatened that if they would ever say anything, that something drastic would occur with them too as well. And therefore, a lot of child abuse and child molestation cases actually don't go reported until, like, the child, in some cases, becomes of age to where they're strong enough to speak out for themselves and strong enough to defend themselves and strong enough to get other people in their corner to be able to say something. And what people tend to not understand about an abused child is this. One, a child is brought into this world in order to be protected by the people who are assigned to love and nourish them. The trust that children have in those people is a natural and wholesome trust. And what I am trying to say with that is this. You can't fault a 27, 37, 47, 57-year-old person for coming back and saying, hey, when I was a child, I was abused, and tell them, well, why didn't you say something then? Because they didn't have a voice to say anything then. Well, why didn't you do anything then? Because they didn't have the power and wherewithal to do anything then. That was the reason they didn't say anything then. They didn't have a voice and they didn't have the power. And for the most part, questions like that come from people who right now in this day and age actually exist in a time where they don't question their politicians. They don't question the police. They don't question lawyers. They don't question teachers. They don't question any authority at all, and have got themselves set up to where their lives are so protected to where the question comes off being a nonchalant, unemotional, a question lacking emotions. You can't ask a person who is willing to talk about the abuse that they endured as an adolescent why they didn't say anything then. Well, they didn't have a voice then. Like many adults now do not have a voice with the abuse and mistreatment that they encounter on jobs or out in the public or wherever. Just like people silently walk away now. Well, the child has no other choice when they're being abused and mistreated but to keep silent and say nothing, because what can they say? They don't know how to articulate what it is that they're going through. They don't know what to do about what they're going through. They don't know how to intervene in their own behalf to be able to go and ask someone for help and assistance. An abused child does not know what to do in order to get people to come to their side to help them. So I was trapped as a child in that abuse, whereas I didn't have the wherewithal to do what I'm doing right now. I didn't have the gumption to speak about it. I didn't have the intelligence and the knowledgeable wherewithal to be able to articulate what it is that I went through from my perspective, because it's my story. And like I said yesterday, the story I'm telling you is not just mine alone. It's the story of so many people who are caught up and living with the horrors of a past that they have never confronted. So, if you don't have a voice and you don't have the wherewithal to actually speak up for yourself or to do anything about your situation, that's I don't think it's fair to make people feel guilty about that. I don't think it's fair to tell people that, well, it's been so long ago. Why are you saying anything now? No, they need to say something at some point. And the reason for that is this. Because if you say something and if you speak out, maybe you can be an inspiration to the abuser that's living right now today, that doesn't understand the long-term impact that their treatment can actually have on somebody down the road. Certain behaviors that we perpetuate upon children is continued by the child when they become of age. And their excuse for doing it will more than likely be, well, it happened to me. It was done to me. And because something harmful or hurtful was done to you doesn't make it right, of course, for you to do that to anyone else. But these are the things, again, for the most part, it comes off as lip service with people saying two wrongs don't make a right. But the reality of the situation is that we don't practice that teaching. We don't practice that belief where two wrongs don't make a right. We have a tit for tat kind of generation where you hurt me, I'm gonna do everything I can to hurt you back. You hurt me, I'm gonna pray to God to protect me from you. And in doing so, I'm gonna hope that God comes around and does something to you so you'll know how I felt, because the person doesn't have the strength enough to represent themselves and to check their abuser. I didn't have the strength as a child to check my abuser and represent myself. So it continued on up until the point to where I was 14 and actually sent away by my father. The military told him to send me away to the nearest relatives in the lower 48. And coming down here to Louisiana from Anchorage, Alaska, is actually what began the steps toward incarceration. But here's what my parents didn't know. And here's what most abusive parents don't know. When anyone is abusing a child, when anyone is beating a child for a little of anything, not vacuuming the floor properly, the entire floor is vacuumed. In one little corner, there's a grain of rice. So you punish the child and you beat on them, or you feed them a spoon of everything that the entire family is sitting around the table having a big dinner, but this one child is being given a tablespoonful of everything at the table, forced to wash the dishes afterward and go to bed hungry, and then wake up the next day or be awakened that night being beaten for something that he or she cannot fathom in their head. Why is this happening to me? Why is this going on with me? What goes on in an abused child's mind, what went on in my mind as an abused child was the endless question, why is this happening to me? Why are they doing this to me? And what do you want an abused adolescent to say or do? So yeah, when they turn 17 or when they turn 27, 37, 47, 57 years old, yeah, it's time to talk, But it's never too late to talk about stuff like that, because there are so many abusive people that are walking around the face of the planet these days that don't understand the impact, the negative impact that they're actually having in someone else's life, because no one is telling them. No one is speaking. Instead, what they're doing is glamorizing the abuse by saying, yeah, it's a bad child, spare the rod, spoil the child, and it's just ironic to me that anyone would try to justify any kind of abuse. And then when the same mistreatment occurs to them, it's not fair all of a sudden. This shouldn't be done to me all of a sudden. What did I do to deserve this all of a sudden? Well, if we believe in the laws of karma, you reap what you sow. You did what you did to that child, or you did what you did to that person, so it's coming back to you. But growing up abused, what was going on in my head as an abused child? And I'm not going to say that what was going on in my head is actually going on in the minds and the lives of children who are facing this right now today. And it's a dark spot in our culture, I think, in this country, that we touch on the issue and try to encourage people not to abuse children, and we kind of like graze the idea of it, but no one really wants to get into it. So they just made a law that says that, well, if you spank your child and they call the police, you're going to go to jail, or if you shout at your child, in public or whatever, and you hurt their feelings, they call the police, you're going to go to jail. Should children be chastised and issue punishments for things that they do that are displeasing or unproductive for them as a citizen down the road? Well, yeah, because that's how learning is actually enforced. That's how an education is actually enforced. There must be penalties for consequences in every aspect of our lives. There must be sanctions placed not only upon children, but upon all of us in society. If you want to live in society freely and be able to be comfortable enough to come and go as you please, then these are the guidelines and the rules that you have to play in, and that's understood in a household. Children do have a place in the household. They don't provide the bills. They don't provide food. They don't buy their own clothing. And I hate to use this analogy. I hate to use the analogy I'm about to use right now. But a child, I felt like that the pets in the house were treated better than me. I felt like my dogs, I felt like the family animals were treated better than I was. Because when they would do wrong, it was laughed off, they were petted, and they were told, no, you know better than that. Come here, you're just so cute, you're just so cute. And then their poop and their urine was cleaned up or whatever, and they were given more of an opportunity to learn not to use the bathroom in the house, not to defecate and urinate in the house. Whereas with me, if I didn't take the trash out, I was beaten almost unconsciously. If I said I didn't want to do something that was insisted, then I was forced to stand in a corner with my arms out. And every time my arms would come down a little bit, I would get a whack on the back with an extension cord or a stick. It was just, I don't think my parents I don't think my stepmother and my father looked at what they were doing as being torture, but these are some of the same tactics that are used to torture people, to get information out of them. Sensory deprivation, depriving a full, nourishing meal, the same stuff that you would see in prison camps. That were actually perpetuated upon me when I was a kid, coming up with my parents. This is what I mean by, I believe that the way I was treated and the way I was spoken to, the lack of a lot of hugs and love and affection and all that, why I say that it actually prepared me for the the road that I took, the journey I took to serve 33 years in prison. Because, and I'm jumping here, by the time I got into prison, I had been so hardened from the boot camp of living in that house with my stepmother and my father, that by the time I got to prison, I was already psychologically prepared for whatever they had to dish out, because I went through it here in the house. I was ready for it. I didn't mind fighting. I didn't mind standing on my own 2 feet. I didn't mind being strong. I didn't mind being able to take any abuse that was coming my way, except now the situation was different. Now I was put in a position in the prison system to where I would have to stand on my feet, or I would be looked down upon by the other men that were actually serving time. But again, like I told you yesterday, child abuse is something that we do not discuss in prison. We discuss alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sexual deviance. We discuss anger management, violent behavior, and stuff like that. But what we don't do is try to connect this to the root cause of why we act out the way that we do. And I am only speaking about home abuse that I believe in my instance that actually prepared me for the decades that I would later serve in prison from a juvenile all the way up until I was 49 years old and released back into the society as a person who had served what was considered juvenile life and out here for the first time doing everything I can as an adult. So I think what I'm trying to do right now is get you to understand the connection between home life and how you treat a child and the circumstances and situations that actually exist out there in society that the child would have to go out there and face. Here's what the children don't have, the same thing that the children do not have these days. We always say nowadays, I hear a lot of people saying that children are more knowledgeable these days than what we were when I was coming up. But that's absolutely true. And that's because the technology that's offered by the society has given access to these children. And they have much more of a involvement in the world around them. They have much more of a participation in the activities that are going on that are both beneficial for them and non-beneficial for them. And there's absolutely no way that any adult can monitor what they're dealing with and what they're getting involved in. So it's kind of a game of chess where as a parent or as an adult or as a caretaker or whatever, you're playing cat and mouse really with you're playing cat and mouse with these kids, trying to keep them from being exposed to a lot of what's actually out here in the world. But the bottom line is, how much can you actually protect them from? Well, not much. And so the law has stepped in and said that you cannot beat them, that you cannot spank them, that you cannot be too harsh on them, that you cannot do these things. So they're being prepared for the same downfall or similar downfall that I experienced from a different kind of abuse. Theirs is more of a governmentally influenced abuse. And what I mean by governmentally influenced abuse is that anytime the government is entering your home and making rules about how it is that you'll be able to raise your child, what they're not doing is educating the parent on the alternatives. Okay, you're saying, well, beating the child is wrong. Okay, well, what's the alternative to disciplining my child? You're saying cursing the child is wrong. Okay, well, what's the alternative to disciplining my child? You're saying that harshly punishing them is wrong. Okay, but what's the alternative again to disciplining my child? And the alternatives that are being given are not suitable to the parent, because if I'm going to sign away a piece of paper that says that my child can be spanked at a school by a stranger, but if I do it at home, come on, that's kind of crazy. You'll give the government stepping in, trying to tell people telling people how to raise their children, in my opinion, is wrong. But by the same token, there should be some sanctions placed on the parent by how they choose to chasten their children, because that chastisement, for the most part, has been leading to parents murdering their kids, in some instances, adolescents, in many cases, sexually abusing children, in many cases, adolescents. mothers that are placed in predicaments to where they were teenagers when they had their kids and they lived on the street or they hustled. And then when their son becomes 15, 16 years old, she doesn't look at him and be a little boy no more, and actually encourages him to go out there in society and sell drugs and to commit crimes and to do other criminal activity and other things to bring in money to her so that her life can change. And I have to use the word her because in most African American situations like that, the males are actually excluded from the home, and the female is told that if she's going to be staying in any kind of continued government assistance housing, that he cannot be there. So she's forced to do this on her own. And this is not in every case. I'm not speaking about in every case. I'm only speaking about cases that are similar to mine, where such behavior actually takes place, and the abuse of that child prepares them for the penal environment. This is what I'm talking about here. All right. So please, I'm not saying everybody. I'm not saying this is everyone's situation. I'm only speaking about those occurrences where this is the situation and the subject is not addressed and the issue is not dealt with, and people who have endured this are being told that they were that they need to get over it, that they need to forget it, or even worse, why are you saying something now? Well, we're saying something now because we didn't have a voice then. We're saying something now because we didn't have the strength and the wherewithal to deal with it then. We're saying something now because we can articulate now what we endured then. It's wrong to tell people that they shouldn't look toward a past experience in order to understand where they are right now. If you are the kind of person that does that, then here's what you need to understand. Don't tell people that who they are now is a result of what they went through in the past then. And who they're going to be in the future is a result of what they're doing right now. Pain is pain, whether it was dealt with in the past, whether it's being dealt with now, or if you're going to have to deal with it in the future. So you can't tell people that they cannot deal with the issues that took place in the past by saying, hey, what I'm going through right now is a result of what I went through then. That is the truth. How a person becomes in life has a lot to do with where they've come from. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from. My reality is a reality of mind-blowing, painful past. And my story is not my story alone. There are many of you out there who have endured the exact same thing, and you play it off in your head by saying, "Oh well, you know, he talking about that was shoe. When I was coming up, I got beat with water hoses and shoes, and you know, and whatever else they could get their hand on." Hey, newsflash: you were abused. That's what that is. You you were abused. There are laws that protect children from being abused by adults. You were abused. It was not okay. And as a result of that abuse, you are who you are today. And that's not saying that as a result of the abuse, you are a bad person today. Trials and tribulations are supposed to serve us to the extent to where we go through them and we become better because of them. There are those that just don't get that far. That's not their reality. They go through trials and tribulations, they get abused, they get mistreated, they get walked on, and later in life, they say, okay, well, I'm strong enough to do this to somebody else now. And they're doing it, and in their mind, they're saying, well, it was done to me. It doesn't make it right. Why are they saying it was done to me? Because somebody is saying you're not the only one. Somebody is saying there are people in the world that are worse off than you. Somebody is saying you're not the only one. Somebody is saying that there are people in the world that are worse off than you. Yes, that person is not the only one. And yes, there are people who in the world who are worse off than they are, but their reality affected them this way. Their reality affected them this way. Your reality affects you in the way that it affects you. Someone else who may have gone through something not as bad as you turns out to be a whole lot worse off than you, because we all have our own journey. We all have our own path to walk. We all have our own way that we have to envision things. One of the biggest problems that I've encountered with people is you try to talk to them and they try to make your story their make it about open up and you listen to them uninvolved in what it is that they're saying. You don't take it away from them and say, oh, well, that happened to me too. It's not about you. Oh, well, I went through it and it made me do that. Okay, you're different. Well, my mama did this to me and my daddy did that to me, but I ain't let that break me down. Congratulations. Maybe you can help this person deal with their issues so that they can acquire the kind of strength that you have. So they can acquire the kind of strength that you have. I just come from a penal environment after 33 years, and it wasn't easy for everybody to endure it, but it was easy for me because my abusive past prepared me for it. Their abusive past did not. When they got to the prison environment, they broke all the way down. They broke down. Many of those men lost their minds because they weren't able to deal with the past, their past, in the way that I was able to deal with mine. My past strengthened me and gave me the wherewithal to be able to stand on my own 2 feet and to earn the respect of the men that I was in there among. But there were other men who had a much more painful past than mine, and they broke under. There were some men who did not come from abusive households. Their abuse took place outside the household, and they were never able to discuss with their reasonable, loving parents what it was that they were going through, because the society teaches us that we're supposed to suck it up and not talk about it. The society teaches us that we're supposed to not say anything. You know, little girls that are being molested, especially in the African American and Latino communities, are growing up thinking, well, it's a normal thing, because many of the women that they're speaking to went through the exact same thing and didn't say anything, and they're coaching them and telling them, don't worry about it. You know, it's not your fault. You know, you got to be stronger than that. No, don't call the police. You know, don't tell anybody. Just go on with your life and just stay away from the person. That doesn't help anything. It doesn't help anything, and it doesn't help the abuser, and it doesn't help the one that was abused. That's another kind of psychological abuse, because you know what that woman's going to do later on when her daughter goes through it? Well, I went through it too, baby. It's okay. Listen, you just got to move on. No. You don't correct the ills in the world, and you don't shine light in the darkness by perpetuating more darkness, by telling the person it's okay to be in that darkness, by telling the person that it's okay to be hurt, that by telling the person that abuse is okay, by telling the person that you still don't have to have a voice even after you went through what you went through. You don't do that. You don't do that. I often ask myself, if I would have had someone to talk to back then who would have stepped in and injected something into the home environment, would it have helped my parents to not be physically abusive, to not be verbally abusive, to not send me to bed hungry, to not wake me up in the middle of the night with an extension cord or a stick, to not be so, to not down me whenever I did my best? Okay, I wasn't a straight A student, but I made C's. I passed. I wish I could have been a straight A student, you know, because I saw how the other parents was treating their children who were straight A students. But man, I couldn't get my parents to do it to me. I wanted to be treated so well by my parents that I used to bring report cards home and change my grade on the report card because I wanted love. I would change my C's to B's. I would change my B to an A, you know, on a typewriter, you know, and I did it because I didn't want to be hit anymore. I didn't want to be put down anymore. I didn't want to be told that I wasn't good enough anymore. I didn't know how to say I did the best I could, and the best I was able to do was a C. I wasn't able to say I probably could have got a B or an A if you hadn't sent me to bed hungry last night. I didn't know how to say I could have did a whole lot better all the way around if every time I looked at you, I was so afraid of you because you weren't giving me love and I didn't know what you were going to say. I didn't have the voice back then. I didn't have the wherewithal back then to be able to say, hey, you're hurting me. I don't want to be hurt. All I could do was cry. All I could do was scream. All I could do was be afraid. All I could do was live in fear. All I could do was have a nervous breakdown because I did not have the wherewithal to stand and say, stop. And I didn't know how to talk to anybody else that would say, you know what, this is wrong. We need to start making some suggestions to that household because this child deserves better. Do I believe my past had something to do with my eventually being on a 33-year journey in prison? Yes, I do. Me, in my instance, I believe that for me. And I believe that many of the men that I was incarcerated with had a similar experience. But those are the things that we didn't talk about in prison. 5,600 people on an 18,000 acre farm. and they were in there for murder. We were in there for armed robbery. We were in there for rape. We were in there for child molestation, drug dealing, gang activity, you name it. Good men. Many of them come from good homes. Homes that had parents that loved them, that did not believe in the behaviors that they practice. But the question you got to ask yourself is, how did he get involved with it? It was at school. There's another kind of abuse that goes on out there in the world, people. When you go to work and your child goes to school, there's another kind of psychological abuse that's taking place because they are, again, exposed to the whole world. So what do you do about it? I believe that intervention could have taken place when I was younger if someone would have sat down, anyone, and helped me find my voice, because I did not know how to talk about it. I believe that when I was a kid, that if I would admit to drinking, if I would admit to smoking cigarettes and weed, if I would admit to run around with a bunch of other boys and letting the air out of people's tires, if I were to admit stealing out of the store, whenever I learned how to steal out the store from other kids. We would go in the store and we would buy one donut, put it in the bag, go through the candy aisle, fill it up, and, run out the door. I didn't learn it from my parents. I learned it from these other kids, because I didn't have enough interaction with my father, where responsibility was taught. I feared my father. I had more fear of my father than I had of God. I didn't have a relationship with my stepmother, so I lost that motherly love when my mom passed. And unfortunately, even after coming out of prison after all these years, I'm not going to sit up here and lie to you and tell you that everything was peaches and cream when I got out, because it wasn't. Now, I had to tell her one day, I don't even know what to do with you anymore, but I'm 50 years old right now. And I have a different mentality that was strengthened and molded and shaped in the prison system. The examples I had of what it was to be a man didn't come from my father. It came from the people I interacted with in prison. No kidding. I learned what it was to stand on my own 2 feet and have my own voice from the men that were surrounded around me while I was doing time in prison. That's where I learned to get this voice from. That's where I learned to get this kind of self-confidence from. That's where I learned to hold my head up from. That's where I learned that it was okay to be who I was. I learned it from them. I learned it from those men in prison. Some of the smartest and most intelligent people I have met in my life, I met behind them bars. And many times I had to ask myself the question, what in the world are you doing in here? What in the world are you doing in here? But if you sit down and talk to them long enough, you'll find out something. Yes, they were successful business owners, but they had drug issues. Yes, they had drug issues, but they weren't drug issues that they picked up on their own. No, they didn't pick the drug issues up on their own. And yes, it was something that was introduced to them when they were young. Because many of them got that story about an uncle that they can tell you about that gave them their first hit of cocaine. Many of them got that story that they can tell you about where they had a father who beat on them. And so they grew up violent and hard and angry. Not knowing what to do with that anger. Like I didn't know what to do with my anger. It took me 17 years to graduate a Buddhist course that I took. And the main thing that the Buddhist Association of America expounded on was my anger. All that anger I had inside. All that anger I had inside. All that anger I had inside that come from a childhood where love for me didn't exist. It was the rudimentary fundamentals of actually caring for a child that took place in the household. What I mean by that is I was clothed, I was fed, I was sheltered. All right. I was sent to good schools. I was, but the love in there wasn't there. It wasn't. This isn't love. This isn't love. It's not love. Saying the worst things that you can say out of your mouth to a child when they have done something to anger you is not an example of love. You can twist it up and make it what you want, but it's not love. Deprivation of a child is not love. Sending them to bed hungry, slaving them out around the house to do work, not being able to go out and play with their friends and actually interact as a child with them. It's not love. It's not love. What do? You intervene beforehand. I believe that growing up abused had a lot to do with the path that led me to prison. I want to thank you all for listening, and I really appreciate you. There's going to be more. Hopefully the next live that I do here on YouTube, that one will actually begin to detail for you my high school years. And the reason I'm going to focus on my high school years is because it was 2 weeks after my 17th birthday in 1986. I was a senior in high school down there, Washington Marion Magnet High School in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And it was while in high school that I actually found myself being picked up at my house by the police and charged with second-degree murder and entering the prison system. So tomorrow, I will actually speak on that with you, because I want you to have steps briefly that actually led me there. And if you have any questions, of course, like I said, you can always find me on Facebook. And if you don't know how to submit questions on here, because I don't, and you can submit your questions there, and I will entertain them on here, because I've left a lot of things unsaid that you may be concerned about, and I do want to address them, and I do want to talk. I want to talk, and I hope that what I'm doing will be able to help some organization or some parent or some child that's listening, and if that child does not have a voice, I hope that what I'm doing will give them one. I really do. I hope that what I'm doing now and what I'm saying now at 50 years old will help someone else. And I hope there's no one out there that feels like, well, why didn't you say anything then? I will reiterate to you. A child does not know how to articulate what you are doing. A child does not have the strength to stand up for themselves. It's not fair to ask a child any of that. Thank you. Be blessed. Be a blessing. We'll see you later.